Straight leg dynamic kick. A really great little twist on a donkey kick position here, where we are just essentially getting a big range of motion and allowing the glutes essentially to really stretch and then contract. So we're getting a real great range of motion here. So the reason I call it dynamic is because generally a kick back or a position where we're on all fours and kicking back would just involve coming back to a set position, whereas here we're going to come past that set position, going out, so we're stretching that muscle, and then we're going to squeeze it again on the way back out. So essentially you're going to be on all fours. As I said, I've done a donkey kick video too, check that out. Again, this is just a variant on a theme. This is my preferred, but however, plenty of my clients and people I've worked with in the past prefer the donkey kick route, etc. in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Here I really like the amount of glute activation and the fact that it really feels like it really stretches out that hip for its full range of motion as well, and I really like that. So, because I think it has a good carryover into doing anything which maybe involves moving the legs for a bigger range of motion. Maybe you're running or sprinting all of a sudden, maybe you'll catch that bus, whatever it is, doesn't really matter. So what we're going to do is get ourselves in the all fours position. I'm not going to go over this too much because I've done plenty of videos on how to get into this position here, but what we're going to do is make sure our back is in a nice neutral position, winding those shoulders up a little bit. What that allows them to do is go back and down into the pockets, showing our armpits to the floor here. So it's a nice position. Now, what I mean by this is, so I've set myself up, I've made sure I've got core engagement, so I don't want that back to go into hyperextension, I want to hold that position here. Now, what would normally happen from here is we would come out into a straight leg kickback like so, and come back, and then go back out again. Now that in itself is great, and that could make its own little exercise right there. However, I'm trying to add just a little bit more to your repertoire of exercises or potential exercises that you ever might want to do. So from here, what we're going to do, we're setting ourselves up for this position, and ultimately it's almost the same, except there is just one vital little difference. And that difference is, from here, what we're going to do, we're going to work with this left leg. Is from here, we set ourselves up, and we're going to come in first off, come in as much as we can. Now, from this position, now we're going to extend back. So we come through and back. Now what happens here is the muscles gone on stretch here, the muscles, and then they're going contracting. I'm particularly talking about the glutes here, the glute really working hard to come through from this position and out. And also what happens when you're in that tucked position here, when you're up here, we're getting the core engaged too. So that's the other reason why I include it in there, because you get a bit more of a dynamic element in terms of the core really tightening up to help bring that leg up, and also the hip flexors, because the hip flexors have to help really bring that leg up. So what happens here, the hip flexors will come into play around here, and now all of a sudden to come up into this position, the hip flexors are now working. So not only are we working the glutes, but we're working the hip flexors as well. It's only a minor change, but going through that range of motion where you're really bringing that hip into what is from extension, where the leg's right the way out, into a massive amount of flexion, which is when it comes right the way in, is really going to make sure that those muscles are working. And not only that, supporting muscles, which may be left out in a standard kind of position, are going to be working too. So we've got the core working to some degree, particularly on an anti-rotational base, but I don't want to get too technical. So it's trying to help balance you out here. Hip flexors are holding the leg in that position. At the same time, those glute muscles are on stretch, and then we're going to kick back out, and then they're going to come in and tighten up. And ultimately, that is what makes a muscle get stronger and develop in its own form, is through going big range of motion and contracting at the same time. So ultimately, if it goes from an elongated state into a contracted state, then you're really getting the most out of that muscle. So I really like this exercise. It's one to definitely give a go to. It can feel a little awkward first off, getting that knee through, and particularly keeping stability. And also you may feel that these hip flexors tire out just as much as the glutes. Well, then that's good, because what you're doing is getting the most out of the exercise. So that's smart exercising. So a really great exercise there, predominantly to work the entire hip region.